colonial economy, were doing trading based on resources, tin, rubber, later on palm oil. But that has moved to a more outsourced manufacturing economy, with Singapore leading the way in the early 60s and Malaysia followed suit in the 70s and subsequently. The idea was we became outsourced manufacturing hubs particularly for the US economy. Of course, eventually that was taken over the role was taken over by China, and Singapore also became a financial hub and not just a manufacturing hub. But I think this is a time for us to think of a 3.0 for Malaysia and Singapore economy, and perhaps for the world economy, given the context I have outlined earlier. A 3.0 is about not just about make in Malaysia. The first phase was about colonial mercantile trading system or trading economy based on resources. The second phase was about make in Malaysia, make in Singapore, make for the United States, make for the global market. But I think we are entering into a potential third phase. It is about make by Malaysia, by creating our own IP, by creating our own innovation. And I think Singapore shares the same aspiration to create our own technology, to no longer just think about being a user, but also being a creator. And if we imagine that Johor and Singapore can become a very strong cluster, if we imagine that the financial capital in Singapore, the financial capability in Singapore, together with Johor, if we can create innovations, if we can create new technologies here, we will be a very important region. And we may have to now shift the way we think. We've always been thinking about exporting to the United States, because the United States is the consumer of the last resort, and in many instances, the consumer of the first resort. But it's time for us to think about creating technology for ASEAN, creating technology for India, Bangladesh, for Brazil, for the bottom billions. And if we can imagine that Malaysia and Singapore combined, we can create technology giants, we can create technological companies that will provide not necessarily the high tech, but middle tech, provide technology, create technology for the rest of the world, will be in a very interesting position. And for Malaysia and Singapore economy to succeed, and to succeed in a new era, it is important that we always keep in mind that combined Malaysia and Singapore economy can actually help power change in ASEAN. The world is shifting. The world is shifting, and ASEAN is an interesting work in progress. If we can strengthen ASEAN, and if we create ASEAN as a very strong and coherent unit, it will help everyone. And to make ASEAN a very strong unit, we need to be able to create a middle class in ASEAN. We need to see the Indonesian being rich. We need to see the Cambodians being a middle class, or having a middle class. And when I say middle class, what do we mean by middle class? We mean by having enough people who have discretionary power to spend, who have discretionary spending, and who have enough disposable income so that they can make discretionary spending. And that there are actually very few in ASEAN. So imagine that in 20 years' time, by 2045, we can create a middle class in ASEAN. That means ASEAN will have consumers. ASEAN becomes a consumer base, and we're not seeing ourselves just as producer, we're also seeing ourselves as consumer. And we will be able to create a lot more two-way, three-way trades with other regions. And if the world has a strong ASEAN, if the world has an ASEAN that is not just producers but also consumer, the world will also be an interesting place. Then you will imagine that United States is a consumer market, EU is a consumer market, China is a consumer market, India is a consumer market. ASEAN is a strong consumer market. And of course, Africa may be able to get its act together, and it may be an interesting region. And with the Middle East, the world becomes not in the current structure, but in a very different structure. Which is why I take you around the world, because I see the importance of what we are doing. You're actually in my constituency, my state constituency. I'm both MP for Iskandar Putri and also Adun for Perling. But I want to take you to this broader picture, because I think what you are doing now today, what we are doing together today, is important. It's not just about Johor and Singapore. It also has wider implication, and if we do well, we play a small role in creating a better world. Thank you very much. Thank you to Maybank for sponsoring, and thank you everyone for attending.